All right, so you want to know about this movie, District B13, this French action flick from 2004, and you've got like a ton of IMDb reviews,
You
right?
got a whole stack of them.
So we're going to try to help you out, give you the gist, see if it's worth your time.
Exactly.
Cool. Cool. So just glancing through these, one thing jumps out. This is not your typical like shoot 'em up action movie.
Yeah.
People are comparing it to, Escape from New York, like that kind of vibe, walled off dystopian future kind of thing. But it's in Paris.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the action. Whoa, get ready for some serious parkour. Like next level stuff, people are saying, like superhuman, insane, all that.
Yeah, the stunts are definitely a big talking point in the reviews.
But here's the thing. A lot of people are saying the plot is pretty simple, maybe even predictable. So is that a deal breaker? Or does District B13 make up for it in other ways? I think that's what we're trying to figure out here.
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah. Let's bring in our expert, who is amazing at, like, seeing the bigger picture and finding those hidden gems. What do you think?
Well, it's funny you say that about the plot, because some reviewers actually see this simplicity as a positive, like it's refreshing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say the film knows what it is, pure action, adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
No messing around. And with so many movies being like 2.5 hours long these days,
Tell me about it.
a tight 85 minutes can feel like a gift.
I totally get that. Sometimes you just want a movie that gets straight to the point.
Right.
But okay, let's talk action for a sec. Parkour, parkour, parkour. It's like every other review mentions it. So what's the deal with that?
So parkour is more than just like flipping around and doing cool tricks.
Okay.
It's like a discipline,
Yeah.
a way of moving, super fluid, super efficient.
Mm.
And this film doesn't just like throw in some parkour for show. One of the stars, David Belle,
Okay.
he's actually one of the guys who founded parkour.
Oh, real?
So what you're seeing on screen, it's authentic, like raw athleticism, not just CGI and special effects.
That makes sense why people are calling it superhuman and insane. Like they're seeing something, real,
Yeah, exactly.
not fake.
And for an action film from 2004, that focus on practical stunts, that was pretty rare.
Mm.
Back then, CGI was getting huge, right?
course, yeah.
People were saying it was overused. So District B13 is almost a throwback, like those old school movies where the stunt people were the real stars.
Like pushing the limits of what the body can do.
Exactly.
I dig it. So we've got that old school action vibe, but with this futuristic dystopian setting. And the thing is, it's not New York or LA, it's Paris.
Right.
Which a lot of reviewers found, refreshing.
Yeah. Paris isn't your typical option movie backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that unexpected setting makes it even more interesting. It makes you think,
Mm-hmm.
maybe this kind of dystopian future isn't so far-fetched. It could happen anywhere.
Yeah, it kind of adds a layer of social commentary. Like even in a developed country, this kind of poverty and division could exist.
Absolutely.
Which leads to another thing some reviewers mentioned, this like socialist undertone in the film. Now, I don't want to get into any political debates here, but just in terms of the story, how does that play out?
Okay, so you've got the walled-off district, right? That's a pretty clear symbol of inequality. And then you've got our two main characters, Lido, who lives in the district, and Damien, the cop from the outside. They're coming from completely different worlds.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. And their partnership, it really highlights that tension, between the system and those who are struggling within it.
It's like they represent two different perspectives on how to deal with the problem.
Exactly.
So it's not just mindless action. There's a deeper message there. It makes you think about social injustice and all that.
It definitely has those thought-provoking elements. It's not just a popcorn flick you forget about as soon as you leave the theater.
Now, I'm kind of curious about this whole French factor we keep talking about. The Paris setting is one thing, but reviewers also praise the film's, authenticity. Like, it feels genuinely French. What do they mean by that?
It's hard to describe, but there's this energy, this style.
Uh-huh.
Even the humor feels very French.
Okay.
And the fact that it's in French with subtitles, it adds to the whole experience.
Yeah.
It's not trying to be a Hollywood blockbuster. It's embracing its own identity.
And that's a good thing, right? Like, it reminds us that great action movies can come from anywhere and that exploring different cultures can make the genre even richer.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting that French factor you mentioned. It's like the film has its own vibe, its own personality almost.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's go back to that social commentary for a minute. How does District B13 actually, work that into the story?
Well, a good place to start is with Lido and Damien, our main guys.
Right.
They're not just your average action hero duo, punching their way through problems. Lido, the parkour expert from the district, he kind of represents, like, the resilience of the people who live there. They've been marginalized, forgotten.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Damien, the cop, he's more like the establishment, right? Although we start to see him question things as the movie goes on.
So their partnership, it's like a smaller version of the bigger conflict going on.
Exactly. They're forced to work together, but they come from such different worlds, different values, different experiences.
And as they work together, we see that the problems in the district, they run deeper than we thought at first.
Right. It's not just some isolated incident. There are hints of corruption within the government, the police. You start to realize that the situation in District B13, it's not an accident.
It's a symptom of something bigger.
Yeah.
Which makes me think about that socialist undertone some reviewers mentioned. Is that reading too much into it? Or is there something to that interpretation?
I think it's a valid point. The movie definitely makes you think about power. Who has it? Who abuses it? And it questions whether violence is ever a real solution to social problems.
So District B13, it's not shying away from asking tough questions.
Not at all.
But it's also delivering those amazing action scenes. Speaking of which, some reviewers compared the action to, like, Asian action cinema, films like Ong Bak. What's the connection there?
Okay, so think about when District B13 came out, 2004. That was a time when Western action movies were getting really into CGI. Right.
Tons of special effects.
And audiences were starting to get a little tired of it. They wanted something more real, more gritty.
Something with more oomph.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where Asian action cinema came in. Those films were all about practical stunts, martial arts, real human skill.
And District B13 taps into that same energy.
Absolutely. It's all about what the human body can do. No fancy tricks, just raw talent.
I mean, the parkour, the fight choreography, it's all so visceral. Like, you're right there in the action.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why the film has been so successful. It's a celebration of human potential, pushing limits, defying expectations. It shows that action can be both exciting and artistic at the same time.
Do you think maybe District B13 actually influenced other action movies that came after it, especially in the West?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely possible. You can see some of its DNA in films like Casino Royale, the Bourne movies too. They both went for that more grounded, realistic style of action.
It's like District B13 showed Hollywood that audiences were ready for something different.
Exactly. And that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Like, this kind of niche French action film might have changed the whole game.
It's possible.
But speaking of niche, let's go back to that French factor. Reviewers seem to really appreciate the film's unique cultural perspective. Like, it's not just a generic action movie. It feels distinctly French.
Yeah, and that's something that often gets overlooked when we talk about action films.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the big Hollywood productions, but there's a whole world of action cinema out there,
Right.
each with its own flavor, its own style.
And District B13, it's a perfect example of that. It's not trying to be like Hollywood. It's proud to be French.
Exactly.
And that authenticity, it makes the film even more special.
For sure.
Okay, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to take a second to bring this back to you, the listener. What are you thinking so far?
Yeah, what's standing out to you? What are you most curious about?
Because in the next part, we're going to take a closer look at the characters, their motivations, the choices they make.
We'll explore how their relationships change, how they deal with all the crazy challenges they face, and how their individual stories contribute to the film's overall message.
So stick with us as we delve even deeper into District B13. We'll uncover the layers of meaning and complexity hiding beneath all the action. Okay, so we've talked about the setting, the whole social commentary thing, the action, that French feel. But now I want to zoom in on the characters themselves, the people driving this whole story.
Yeah, good point. Because even with amazing stunts and a thought-provoking story, if the characters aren't interesting, the whole movie kind of falls apart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with Leto and Damien, our main duo. It's that classic odd couple setup, the streetwise guy and the by-the-book cop forced to team up. But what makes their dynamic work in District B13?
Well, for me, it's that they're both super skilled, just in totally different ways.
Right.
Leto's parkour skills are basically superhuman, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Damien's this expert marksman. They're not just relying on brute force. They both bring something unique to the table.
So it's not just brawn versus brains. They each have a bit of both. That's cool. But what about their personalities? Do they clash? Or do they find common ground?
It's kind of both, actually.
Yeah.
Leto, being from the district, he's more practical, willing to bend the rules to get things done.
Makes sense.
Damien, coming from the outside, he's a lot more rigid at first.
Right.
Like by the book, even in this crazy situation.
So that classic clash of ideals. But it sounds like there's room for some character growth there, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot of reviewers mentioned that Damien, even though he starts out as this, like, rule follower, he changes as he sees what life is really like in District B13. You know, the corruption, the injustice. It makes him question everything.
So he's not just there to be the opposite of Leto. He's on his own journey.
Exactly. And that journey makes him a much more interesting character.
Okay, so beyond the action, beyond the changing worldviews, what about their core motivations? Like, at their heart, what drives these guys?
For Leto, it's simple, it's personal. His sister has been kidnapped by Taha, the gang leader.
Yeah.
Everything he does, every risk he takes, it's all to save her.
So it's not just about being a hero. There's real emotion driving him.
Right.
What about Damien? Is it just duty?
At first, yeah, he's just following orders to disarm the bomb. But as he gets deeper into the world of District B13, things change for him. It becomes less about following orders and more about, like, finding the truth, exposing the people who are really responsible for this mess.
So they both end up fighting for something bigger than themselves, even though they start from such different places. That's cool. But what about the other characters, especially the women? Do they get lost in all the action?
You know, it's interesting. A lot of the reviews mention Lola, Leto's sister.
Okay.
And while she is the, damsel in distress at first, a lot of people said the actress gives a really strong performance.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, she's not just helpless victim.
Yeah, it's always a bummer when female characters are just there to be rescued. Did reviewers point to any specific moments where Lola breaks out of that stereotype?
I don't want to spoil anything, but there are definitely hints that Lola's not just waiting around to be saved. She shows she's resourceful, she's determined to survive. It's a nice twist on that whole damsel in distress thing.
Sounds like there's a lot more going on with these characters than meets the eye. It's not just about who can fight the best. It's about their internal struggles, their growth, how they deal with these, like, really tough situations.
Exactly. And all that complexity, it's what makes District B13 more than just an action movie. It's a film that says something about society, about justice, about the choices we make.
So as we wrap this whole thing up, I want to leave you with this. When you watch District B13, don't just get caught up in the action. Pay attention to the characters, how they interact, what drives them.
Yeah, ask yourself, do they make you think about things differently? Do they make you question the easy answers? Because that's where the power of a good story lies. It makes us think, feel, and connect with the characters, even if they're in these crazy situations.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into District B13. We've gone through the reviews, explored the themes, the characters, everything. Now it's your turn. Go watch the movie. And be prepared to be entertained, challenged, and maybe even changed a little bit by the experience.